coffee with my coffee.
Hi, I'm Isabel, and today I'm going to show you how to annotate a poem for an English class and how to start a conversation about it. We're going to use my edition of the poems of Emily Dickinson as an example, and as you can see, I have a lot of page marks and a lot of annotations in these poems. I had a seminar class about it, and I wrote a final paper about despair. That's what those green tabs are all about. So we're going to stop here at this random page, which is not random at all because it has my favorite poem, which is Hope is the Thing with Feathers. But today I want to bring your attention to a more obscure one that says, To die takes just a little while, which is down below. I'm going to start by looking at the visual aspects of the poem. We can see that it has 3 stanzas, with 4 lines each. Of course, we can't forget about all the dashes that Emily Dickinson was very famous for. So let's read the poem. To die takes just a little while. They say it doesn't hurt. It's only fainter by degrees. And then it's out of sight. A darker ribbon for a day, a crepe upon the hat. And then the pretty sunshine comes and helps us to forget the absent, mystic creature that but for love of us had gone to sleep that sound this time without the weariness. Now let's take your time, read it once, twice, even 3 times, and always try to do it out loud because it's going to be better for you to understand the sound of the words. We're going to divide our physical space. If you have it on a sheet of paper, it's better, and then we can separate the syllables on each line. The reason why we're going to do this before trying to look for meaning in the poem per se is because sometimes looking at the atomic level lets us get familiar with the poem, and then once we get to do the analysis about it, then we automatically have begun to think about the themes and the words because we were paying attention to how they were formed, which type of language was used, and which type of rhythm is the poem transmitting to us. After that, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. To the left, we only have the number of syllables in each line. We're going to move along and we're going to start scanning for meter. To scan a poem, you need to find the stressed syllables. To mark the stressed syllables, you're going to put an ictus or kind of like a slant line. And to mark the unstressed syllable, we use a U symbol or a mora. Afterwards, you're just going to add the number of stressed syllables that you found in each line, and we're going to put it on the right side. For example, on the first line, we have 4 stressed syllables. We have die, just, lit, while. There's no easy way to do this. You just have to say it out loud and try to pronounce it with different stress to see which one sounds better. Also, you can try to tap your foot to the rhythm if you're on the more musical side, or you can try putting your hand below your chin, and each time you try to say a word, if your chin lowers enough, it might be because it's stress. After identifying the stresses and unstresses, you should probably see a pattern within your poem. You can see that there's an unstressed, stress kind of pattern in this one, and that's what it's famously called an iamb. An iamb is just a combination of unstressed, stress, which is one of the most popular combinations that you will see in poetry. After each repeated unit or iamb, after each repeated unit, that in this case are iambs, we count them as 1. I like using colors. In this poem, I use orange to separate each combination, and we can see that we have 4 units. Those units are called a foot. Because the first line has 4 foots, which are iambs, we call that an iambic tetrameter. And the second line, which is also composed by iambs but has 3 foots, you will call that an iambic trimeter. The combination of both iambic tetrameters and iambic trimeters are called common meter. With this established, I like looking for the words I don't know. For Emily Dickinson specifically, I like using this website, which includes the Emily Dickinson lexicon. With this, you can actually look at the dictionary that Emily Dickinson would have looked when she was writing her poetry. For example, we have the word crepe. Crepe says that it is a dark funeral clothing, delicate plain fabric of black silk, worn by those in mourning, which means that it's not part of the funeral attire of the one that we lost, but is worn by the people that go to the funeral. This is important to us because even when we haven't started thinking formally about the meaning, we know that we're going to be talking about those in mourning as well as those that have died. After reading it again for meaning, we can see that the first stanza, it's talking about those who die, and the second and third one are more about the people who are left behind. That can indicate that we have two layers of meaning in this poem, and then we have two focus. So that's why I like separating them. Now we're finally ready to think about meaning and to brainstorm a little bit. I'm using an old notebook that I use for my Emily Dickinson class, but you can just use your own notebook for your own class so you can take this material with you. I start by doing the header. I put which type of poem it is, if I have it, if in my collection this is number 315. I put the year that this was written, by whom, whatever information that you can get. Now it wouldn't be a good time for you to search online what this poem is about because you haven't brainstormed yet. But I would definitely recommend you, after you brainstorm and you wrote your notes, to look in the internet, which is a wonderful source, and to read what other people think about this poem without plagiarizing their own thoughts. This is why this goes at the end, just a little bit extra if you think you might need it. If you don't know what to start writing, you can just dump whatever we did in our first annotation period of the video. So you just write the vocab that you learned, the structure, if it was iambic, trochaic, anapaest, whatever that it was, the structure, the rhythm, and with that you can move on and think about why is that important. For example, in the poem I was doing, the rhythm was very soft and very gentle, and it was smooth, it flew. That's something that iams do by their own. People usually compare them to water and to breeze. It moves along very well. That takes me to the theme of my poem. After reading it again, like the 10th time, I know that it's about death. But what is it about death? I think it's about the gentleness of death to the ones that go away. Because on our first stanza, we center on how they say it doesn't hurt. To die doesn't hurt. It's only fainter by degrees and then it's out of sight. It's not something that bothers the one that leaves. And then second and third, we actually focus on the mourners. So I want to talk about those elements. When you think about elements of a poem, you need to pay attention to see if they have characters, if we have seasons, if we have animals. In this case, the uppercase letters give us a clue. We have ribbon, day, crepe, and hat. Those are the only uppercase letters that kind of seem out of place. Because of that, we can see that the uppercase works as a focus point to give importance to the words. We have a darker ribbon. This is a ribbon that is out of the ordinary because it's dark. Because it's a special day in the funeral. It's for a day, and the day is marked as uppercase. All of these are clues that this is something important and out of the ordinary. They have some character to it. Then we have a crepe, that was the word that gave us the clue about the mourners. Upon the hat. Hat is uppercase as well. So we have all these uppercase words which are part of the funeral rite that you are part of when you go to the funeral of a beloved person. And that's what I write under my element part. I wrote this kind of analysis of what I think, why is this relevant and why is this uppercase. So that's what I think this is what is going on in this poem. But then I like to write a section that says stance about death. And these are not my stance, but these are Emily Dickinson's stance. I noticed that she talks about the one that dies as the absent, mystic creature that goes to sleep for the love of us. So these people are spared from the weariness and the grief that we have. So I can sense that Emily Dickinson is not afraid of death, but is very aware of the emotional pain that goes with grief. And that's what interested her. Because in this, at least in this poem, we don't have a focus on the afterlife, but we do have the focus on an afterlife without the person the die. So that's like a very simple example of how you can separate your thinking about poems. And how can you be a little bit more prepared when you go to a class to discuss them? I like to add a question section as well. These are more guided questions that you might have to a professor or to a small conversation about the poems. Some of my questions are, how does this poem relate to the rest of the death poems by Emily Dickinson? Because usually with big authors, they tag a lot of themes, and this is certainly true for Emily Dickinson. So you can compare how the other rest of poems that talk about death and mourning deal with this. Is this extraordinary, or does this follow a clear line of thinking? Also, while investigating, I see that this poem is written in 1862. And by reading a little bit about Emily Dickinson, you know in 1862 is the year that she wrote the majority of her works. We can compare how does it work with the rest of them. And other question can be like, the poem says that sunshine helps to forget, but does it actually does it, or is a way of saying that thinking positive makes you ease the pain of losing someone? Or you can focus on something more that it is in the text that says, for example, when it says, they say it doesn't hurt. Who says that? Is it wishful thinking? Is it the product of how our society thinks about afterlife? Or is it a reflect on how Emily Dickinson thinks about afterlife and dying? And those can be some questions that can get you started about the poem, but also just a conversation about death and how are your classmates thinking about it and how yourself are thinking about it. I'm sorry that this was a topic a little bit more on the macabre side of things. It's a very nice and gentle poem, so don't be afraid to tackle a poem just because it's not exactly about a nice topic, because you can encounter a poem like this, which is honestly very sweet. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching it, and I hope you like it. Let me know if you want another more video for my back to school series on how to for English Lit, or just as college advice. Just keep in mind that if you are going to a literature class in college or high school, make a point of having a point of discussion and just writing down the things that you think are interesting and that you want to discuss further, and just have fun with it, okay? As usual, I'm going to leave you my social media down below, and if you want, you can leave me a comment, subscribe, like my video, and share it with a friend in need. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Latte boy.